Since it's Shavuot, let's remember, let's recollect.
Well, you know,
let's enjoy this latter rain that's coming down.
It's a little different change of scene. It's raining. It's a beautiful spring day, and the garden path and the fountain out, the fig tree in the distance, the promise that's set before us. And we're looking here in Deuteronomy 8. The entire commandment that I command you today, you shall observe to perform, so that you may live and increase and come and possess the land that Yahuwah swore to your forefathers. So, again, believing that this is an active promise, not a past bit of history about some ancient people a long time ago on the other side of the world. This is a promise to us, present tense, that Yahuwah, our Elohim, promised our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Yaakov, Jacob. Etzi, Isaac is Yitzchak, which means laughter, smile, sport. And Moshe, one of our cultural forefathers, David, various prophets, Yeshua himself, they all talked about this time in the future, which we're at the threshold of. It's just like there's this garden path, and along the way there's these flowers, different scents, different colors, different insects flying around, different little... There was a real nice little garden path over there we're going to film, but it's in the rain so we can't do it. But this is a pretty nice picture and the promise that, well, one of these days every man will sit under his fig tree and under his vine, like you mentioned. And there's another meaning of those words as well. But so this is a rather appropriate, even though it's raining, it's refreshing. This is California. It doesn't get a whole lot of rain, and this is a wonderful thing to actually have this. But the point is, goes on to say, verse 2 of Deuteronomy 8, you shall remember the entire road on which Yahuwah your Elohim led you these 40 years in the wilderness, so as to afflict you. Yahweh took the 40 years in the wilderness to afflict them. Why? It goes on to say, to test you, to know what was in your heart, whether you would observe his commandments or not. He afflicted you and let you hunger. Then he fed you the manna that you didn't know. You didn't even expect. You had no idea he was going to give you manna. Nor did your forefathers know, in order to make you know that not by bread alone does man live, rather by everything that emanates from the mouth of Elohim does a man live. Well, Yeshua quoted that verse. Not by bread alone does man live, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of Elohim. And every word that proceeds from Yahuwah's mouth was in the Hebrew language. And every word is composed of the Hebrew letters. Every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is the elements. Like the universe of matter is made up of elements, which are made up of atoms, which are electrons and protons. The composition of the universe, of every promise, of everything that we're told to observe and remember and walk in these ways is about the Hebrew letters. So as we study the Hebrew letters, we are studying our Father's voice. We're studying his face, because the word face, Penun Yod, Paneh, or Panim, in the plural, literally means in his presence, his countenance, his favor, his attention. Just because a single word, Panim, is described as countenance or face or presence or in his acknowledgement, it's composed of the letters Pei, Nun, Yod. Pei is a mouth. Nun is something that lives in and jumps out, like the 50th day, like Shavuot, like a baby being born, like a fish in the water, frog in a pond that jumps out. Yod is to personalize it. So what is in Yahuwah's mouth that jumps out when he verbalizes it? It's what's in his heart. He said what's in our heart comes verbalized, expressed in us. The study of these words and letters is the regard, the study, thus the worship and prayer to our own Heavenly Father. So he said, contemplate and remember the entire path that he led our forefathers on through the wilderness for 40 years. Well, that's found in Numbers 33. So 2 weeks ago, according to the reckoning of another calendar, for the day of Shavuot, I sat there and I calculated, contemplated, translated, interpreted the meanings of the names of the 42 campsites. I actually wrote it up. Gosh, things are getting wet.
Yeah.
I actually wrote it up, and I have it on the internet that people can have. I mailed it to a few people, emailed it. But here, I'm going to go through it and explain a few things. It starts off in Numbers 33, verse 2. Moshe wrote. Now, this is one of the very first times. There's a couple other times in the book of Exodus. This word katuv, kaf tav vav bet, was even used in Scripture. Moshe wrote. Well, before Moshe, nobody wrote. There was hieroglyphics, there was cuneiform, but nobody wrote the Hebrew language, the Semitic alphabet. So the question is, in this book, or this group that has made a couple of movies, Patterns of Evidence, has speculated on whether Abraham wrote, whether Joseph wrote, whether Moshe invented it or not. But certainly by the time of Moshe, the Hebrew alphabet is in use. That's another subject. But here we have Moshe wrote all the goings forth, Mem Vav Zadi Aleph Yod He Mem, and I'm going to do a little bit more of a word study analysis here for you, but it'll be dark within the hour probably, so this isn't going to be too in-depth. According to the journey, that's Mem Samek Ayin, Yod He Mem. So the word Samek Ayin, those are two letters in the alphabetic sequence. The 15th and the 16th letter. So it's interesting that if you look at the alphabetic letters in their organic sequence, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, A, B, C, D, Alpha, Beta, Gamma, Delta. If you look at the alphabetic letters in their sequence, I propose and project that they're not indiscriminate, but they're very determined, that Yahweh himself intentionally placed these 22, not 23, 26, 27, but he originally had 22. Then there was 5 Sofit letters added as their own little mini alphabet. That's a different thing, and other people have suggested, oh, well, there's another letter, Ayin, and there was other letters plugged in, and maybe some of the letters are out of order. I say no. That Yahweh, because of this Mishkan pattern, because of Psalms 119, where David locked it in, Proverbs 31 talks about a Ashat Kahil, a virtuous, valiant woman, and there's a few other places where the alphabetic letter sequence is established, Daniel 12 being one of them. The point is, those things are locked in, and so you see a word like Mem Samek Ayin, Yod, La Masayaham, the journey upon which they traveled, and there's something about Samek Ayin. Why does Ayin follow Samek? What does it mean? Well, it means to pull out, depart, to go on a journey. Well, that's a picture of the Exodus. But why is it those letters? Nun Samek. Well, Nun is the 14th letter. Samek is the 15th letter. And then Samek Ayin, that's the 16th letter added, and it means they pulled out of Egypt and went on a journey. Well, the 14th day, my wife noticed this one day, Karen, she was looking at the fact that we're told to keep Pesach on the evening of the 14th day of the first month. And then on the 15th day is the first day of unleavened bread. Well, those two letters are Nun, that's the 14th letter. Samek is the 15th letter. And then they depart, that's the 16th letter. It's like, wait a minute, that's the organic letter sequence. Why is that? Is it coincidental or is it on purpose? Well, I believe it's on purpose. Yahweh established the path. Yahweh set up the garden. And you remember when they were in the wilderness for 40 years, that was a punishment because they refused to believe him for the victory, for the success of going into the promised land. It's in the days of Moshe and Aharon, Moses and Aaron, and Joshua being Moshe's second in command. Well, instead, Moshe and Aaron died off, the whole generation died off, and then Joshua took the next generation into the promised land 40 years later. But they moved from campsite to campsite as the pillar of fire and smoke moved and led them. They didn't know how long they would be at each campsite. They didn't know where they're going. They didn't know that there were going to be 42 destination sites where they stopped in and camped. But it's recorded in Numbers 33. And so if we just read, they started at Ramses, okay? And then they went to a place called Sukkot, okay? And then they went to a place called Atem, right? Then Pi-Hahiroth, okay? What's there to remember? Remember, he took each step, okay. So what? The so what is in the meaning of the word. Here you go. So, the word from Ramses starts with the letter mem, but that's a prefix letter that just means from, or at the place. Resh ayin mem samek samek. Ra'am sis. Well, to analyze the words, you see mem means from. Resh ayin can mean noise, shout, evil, or harm. Resh ayin mem is moved violently, thunder, or enraged. Mem samek samek is squeeze, decay, rot, dissolve, or melt. Putting that all together, it's like they came from this place at a time of violent thunder and rage. There was just 10 plagues. And then as an 11th event, Pharaoh and his entire army was drowned in the Sea of Reeds. So there was actually a dozen things that happened. But this noise, this shout of evil and harm, I mean, it was a cataclysm for both Egypt and the entire prevailing culture of Israel was torn apart. So when they wanted to go back to Egypt, it's like, you're not going back to anything. The bridge is washed out. You know, like the Vikings had this concept. You know, you land, you pillage, you jump on your boats and take off. But when you land and you burn your boats, you're staying. There's no way out. It's do or die. It's conquer or be vanquished. You know, so that's what Yahweh did when he destroyed Egypt. He said, there is no going back. And so if there's going to be the second Exodus, it's like, well, America's a pretty nice place. Maybe we don't want to go to the land of Israel. It's a desert. It's crowded over there. America's got some elbow room. I mean, look, it's a beautiful place here. It's a dried up desert over there. If it's going to be like a second Exodus, he might ruin this place and make it untenable for us to stay or return to America for the sake of picking us up and taking us to the land as he promised our forefathers, if that's what's our imminent future. The word ayin mem samek, because remember this is mem resh ayin mem samek samek. So you can take the pieces of the word, and ayin mem samek means burden or carry a load or yoke. Well, from Ramesses, the Israelites had been forced slaves in Egypt to build their cities and to carry their yoke and to make bricks. And Yahweh relieved that from them, and he says, now you're going to carry my burden. I'm your new boss. I thought he let us escape from slavery to freedom. No, we escaped from slavery to the Egyptians, to the slavery and servitude of Yahuwah. We have to serve him. And what's the burden of his yoke upon our neck? Sit down and not work on the seventh day of the week. There, take that. Thou shalt rest on the seventh day. That's the burden, the yoke of his obligation. No, we're going to work for our masters and our culture. Take on his culture. We just talked about that in the last video. Cultural anthropology. The next evolution in the culture of mankind is that it evolves into the kingdom of our Elohim, with Israel preeminent. That's what he said. It's the next flower. See that bend? This walkway, and it goes around the bend, and see what's he got right behind it? Right behind the bend that's in front of us that we can't see is this beautiful provision. Like the Israelites being called out of Egypt, and this beautiful provision of walking into the land of Canaan, and him driving out all their adversaries and letting them live in mansions they didn't build, and farm lands that they didn't have to till, and drink the juice of the grapes that they didn't have to harvest. And when they refused to walk in Yahweh's ways, he sent enemies to do to Israel exactly accordingly. Remember Gideon? In the book of Judges. Whenever Israel would harvest their crops, what was it, the Moabites would swoop in And just as the Israelites were ready to thresh their grain, they'd steal it all. So they let the Israelites do all the labor, all the farming, all the watering, all the tilling, all the harvesting. And then just as it was ready to eat, they'd swoop in and take it. The same thing that Yahuwah was going to do to the Canaanites and give it to the Israelites. Because the Israelites turned against Yahweh, he called in their enemies and had it happen to them. So we have a choice. Do we believe that he's going to favor us because we walk in his ways and listen to his voice and seek his face? Or are we going to have the curse done to us, which is part of the covenant? If you don't listen, he said, if you amalgamate your cultural traditions, your religious observances, your language, your custom, habit, and tradition, your voice, your language, your mental processes, if you blend with the other idolatrous deities of the nations around you, then those people that you leave in the land, those cultures that you revere, that are in the land before you, will become pins in your eyes and thorns in your flesh, and then it will ruin you. And then Yahweh says, what I intended to do to them, I'm going to do to you. That's the threat in front of us, that either it's going to happen where he destroys the other nations who are worshiping and believing in false ideologies, false deities, false doctrines, or he's going to do it to us. It's not like, gee, let's pick a third option. Those are the options. Either we get rid of the things that are counter to what these words say, or it's going to happen to us. And we take hold of what he said. So what did he say? Well, we look at these words. From Ramses. There was a time when Israel was yelled at by its oppressors, made to carry heavy burdens. And so Yahweh, with even a louder voice, came thundering, pounding, 10 plagues, smashed Egypt, rescued his people, then says, now you carry the burden, the yoke of my identity, my culture, my Moedim, my seventh-day Sabbath. And when Israel said, okay, we'll carry it, they got blessed. And when Israel said, we don't care about that stuff, and went and took on the other cultures' days of worship, manners of worship, cultural, ideological, doctrinal, then they got smashed by their enemies because Yahweh made sure that they would. He called in the enemies and smashed his people. But what he said was, as much as I wasn't kidding around, I wasn't joking, I wasn't fooling when I said, this is what's going to happen, and you guys are going to get pounded by the curse coming down and ruining your entire citizenry of Israel for 2,730 years. There's a verse, he says, so too I wasn't kidding around when I said I was going to restore my favor to you, and that I will restore the blessing, and I will have you be my people, and I will be your Elohim, and then we'll really show the world something. He's been looking forward to this. We stand right at the threshold. Is it the tribulation? Is it the beast, the Antichrist, the man of sin, the false prophet, the devil incarnate, taking over the world? Is that what's in front of us? That's what we're being told. Esau rising. That's what we're being told. But we can choose to believe that, no, this is Yahuwah. This is Israel rising. This is Ephraim coming back from the presumed dead, lost at sea. This is Ephraim coming back, waking up to his senses. Jeremiah 31 and saying, hey, let's do this thing right. That's what this is about. Well, then what does this path of the campsites tell us? There's a message in the 42 campsites. From Ramses, they come to Sukkot. Well, Samek Kaf Tav is translated Sukkot. Oh, that's like the festival of Sukkot in the fall where you camp in temporary dwellings. But the word itself means listening. Hello? What did he say? He said, Shema Israel, listen Israel, hear me Israel, and the act of listening is Samek Kaf Tav. It also means look, Samek Kaf Hey. It also means prospect, expectation, perspective. Like a prospector, one who's going to search for the gold. This is gold country in California, right here in Sonora, near Yosemite. This place 100 years ago was swarming with hundreds of thousands of people from all around the world, searching under every rock and every stream and every cave for every little bit of gold. And we are right here saying the greatest wealth in the entire universe is to be found in determining what these letters mean.
Better than fine gold.
Much better than the best refined gold. It also means Samet Kaf means sum, total, cover, screen, thicket, hut, large crowd, outlook, endangered, risk taker, Samet Kaf Vav Nun. A prospector is one who takes the risk, incurs the cost of the investment of his life, of his money, of his time, of his focus, of all his attention, and goes out and makes the best determination and says, that's where I'm going to look. And he goes and he starts hunting and digging and rooting around. And it's in these words. That's Sukkot, where this place, this house was built by a guy who prospered on that endeavor. This house was built by a guy, when was it built? Late 1800s?
No, 1927.
1927, but he had made his money from the...
He had mines.
He had mines.
Tungsten was his main
Tungsten.
investment, but he made a lot off gold. Matter of fact, he produced the last rivet for the Golden Gate Bridge.
The guy who built this house and lived here
Yeah,
made the last rivet
for the Golden Gate
for the
Bridge.
Golden Gate Bridge.
Yeah. It's all gold.
There you go. Anyway, so there's other words that you can spin out or look as derivatives out of Samek and Kaf. Then Kaf Tav is a group, a sect, a herd, a faction, a cult, a section. And so part of this study is to take every individual letter, the meaning of the letter, the position of the letter in the alphabetic sequence, look at prefixes, look at suffixes, put in yods and vavs, look at other similar words that are synonyms, spelled the same or even mean the same, and then look at the various derivatives like Samet Kaf, incite to anger, troublemaker, instigate, arouse. One reason for making these videos is because we're trying to instigate and arouse an interest in the greatest treasure. But it also is prone to incite some people to disturbance, whether it's anger or frustration or there they go again, why don't they just quit using those words, quit accusing us, quit blah, 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 whatever that might be. It's like, listen, the whole purpose of this is to say, this is where the treasure is. And like in California, when you found a treasure, man, you kept quiet. You didn't tell anybody because somebody would kill you and take over your mind. Claim jumpers, as they were called. We're doing exactly the opposite here. We are trying to say, this is exactly where the treasure is to be found. There's more than enough for everybody. And I feel like one of those, was a couple lepers, in that they were hated by society. Everybody else thought they were scumbags. They were always alienated. And they said, look, there was a siege going on. The city was surrounded. There was a famine in place. Everything was going to ruin. People were eating bird dung and their own children. That was their only nourishment they could find. And these guys are going, look, we're going to die anyway. Let's just go see if we can bum a few chunks of stale bread from the enemy camp. I mean, what the heck? So I think there was, 3 guys? They go out there and all of a sudden, overnight, Yahuwah had sent a noise. It sounded like an entire army coming upon them. And so this entire army got up and skedaddled out of there, and they took off running, dropped all their stuff. And so these lepers show up and they go, the enemy's gone and they've left everything, all their stuff, all their food, all their equipment. I mean, it was just a wealth beyond counting. And they started just grabbing and eating and drinking and stuffing their pockets full. And they go, gosh, we can't possibly carry all this. And it would be a grave sin if we were to keep this to ourselves. We got to go tell everybody else that even though that they hated us and they probably think we're insane, we got to go tell them so that they can have some of this too. There's too much just for us. And so then they went and told the city, and there was a stampede that this rushed out, and everybody, in a moment, the siege was lifted, the siege was broken, the famine was relieved. In a moment, Yahuwah, our Elohim, can change any circumstance. And as he said in Deuteronomy 8 there, he said, listen, this isn't the devil overwhelming you. He says, I brought you out of the land, and I brought you into hunger and thirst. I wanted to see what was in your heart. Well, he knows my heart. Well, he wants us to know what's in our heart. He says, so I made you hungry and thirsty. And right around the corner of that, like right beyond the bend of that curve, just a few steps away, bam, there was going to be more quail than you could possibly catch from the sky. In fact, I think it was Moshe even said, oh, come on, how is this possible to feed this great horde? If all the fish in the sea were to jump up on the land, would there be enough to feed this great number of people? And Yahweh says, you think my arm's too short? What? Don't you know who you're dealing with here? What do I have to do to show you? There was just those plagues in Egypt. There was just crossing the Red Sea, Sea of Reeds. Okay, I'll show you. The quail just came in and landed on the ground. Happened on 2 different occasions. Then the manna showed up every day for 40 years. Just go out and pick it up. Tasted like honey, coriander. Our Elohim has more provisions than we could possibly calculate. Our job is to trust him. Simply trust him. And by sitting down on Shabbat, we're saying, listen, I don't know about the math or the finances, how the economics are going to work, but I'm going to work the best I can as if I'm working under him for 6 days, and then I'm going to sit down on Shabbat, and I'm not going to think about it or worry about it, and figure, he's got this. I just got to sit down to prove that I trust that he's got this. And that's our job. Our job is not to figure out how to make the provisions happen. Our job is to sit down to prove that we trust him to make the provisions happen. And Sukkot has to do with listening, looking, prospecting, and being engaged with his voice. The next one, Aleph Tav Mem. Well, Aleph Tav Mem in the dictionary simply means you, Y-O-U. What do you do with that? A campsite named you? How am I supposed to spin this into a remembering? Well, there's more to it. You look at derivatives. Aleph Tav Mem, hey means how strange, curious. Aleph Tav is the alphabetic sequence, beginning to the end. Aleph Tav. Tav Mem is the word for plural, they or you. So Aleph Tav also means yoked with. Tav Mem as a word means complete, artless, perfect, and innocent. Tav Mem Hey is the feminine suffix, means astonished, amazed, honesty, and integrity. Well, if Aleph Tav is, Yeshua is the Aleph and the Tav. The beginning and the end, the first and the last. But if this is the word Y-O-U, then it's like, oh, this is curious, this is astonishing, it's amazing. Is he saying that I am supposed to be the Aleph Tav also? In fact, all of us. So in other words, if I'm reading this Hebraic message embedded within the understanding of the pictographic letters of Aleph through Tav in this 22-letter sequence, it's not just, oh, that's Yahweh or Elohim. Oh, that's just not the Mishkan pattern. That's just not the covenant. That's just not Yeshua ciphered, encrypted into these letters. But this is my destiny. This is my identity. I'm supposed to be just like him. And so when Yeshua said that he was echad with the Father, he was one. And he said at the Garden of Gethsemane, where he was praying before he was crucified, he said he was praying that we would be one in him with his Father, the same way he was echad with his Father. Aleph Het Dalet, Yod Het Dalet is this oneness of the community, of the 12 tribes. It's like, wow, this is not just his story, this is my story. This is our story. This is the reality. It's like, well, this is incredible. Now I can read this as if it was present tense and very real, not just a history of a mythological possibility of spun into a fable handed down through the generations of a other side of the world from thousands of years ago. This is present tense reality. The next campsite, Bet Kuf Zadi Hey HaMidbar. Well, that's not a campsite. That was a qualification of what was happening at Aleph Tav Mem, and it means at the edge of the wilderness. But Kuf Zadi Hey means at the end or at the extremity to be cut off. And so when Daniel was told to hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end, that word end is Kuf Zadi. Well, this is Bet Kuf Zadi Hey. Bet is to be in the condition of. Hey is an expression. So this is in the end of the, as a time of the expression, the end of what? Well, here we are at the end of the 2,730-year curse. And this, if this is talking about us in this condition, then I could look, Bet Kuf Aleph means become an expert, expounding. Kuf Zadi Zadi means cut off, stipulate, fix, remove, hewn down, wood cover, to cut down to size. Ha Midbar, well, it's in the wilderness, at the edge of the wilderness. But Midbar is also language. It's also according to the stipulations. So here we are at the extremity of the stipulations of the curse after 2010, and we're coming back to the cut to size. Well, that's a way of saying the pictographic shape of the meanings of the letters in the language. And that we should expound on that. Well, astonishing, that's what we're doing. Hey, guess what? We're actually doing right now, present tense, exactly what these words are saying. So we're not just reading about this pathway that he took our forefathers on, but we find ourselves suddenly engaged on the same path, step by step. We're doing presently exactly what the meanings of these campsites are, but we wouldn't have known that had we not taken the time to stop and analyze the Hebrew words and consider them according to the enlightenment of what contemplating the meanings of these letters is. It's only in the act of doing what he said that we find out that, oh, that's what he said for us to do, that we were never told to do any other time in our life. Our culture never suggested we learn Hebrew. Our religion never taught us sit down on the Sabbath day and keep the day of Shavuot. Oh yeah, Pentecost was the birthday of the church. That's not why they got together. And was it the birthday of the church? Well, that's what they claim. That was them keeping the day of Shavuot. That he came and did something which they picked up and ran with. Different part of the story. Anyway, the next one, Pi-ha-roth. Pei-yod, well that means mouth. Pei is something which opens, it is a mouth, and Pei-yod means my mouth. Ha, that means the. Het-yod resh tav. Well, Het-resh is a white-haired nobleman, hoary-headed, or hoar-frost is where frost looks like white hair. Het-vav-resh, Het-resh tav. Het-resh tav, this is Het-yod resh tav. But Het-resh tav means grave, or something dug in. So an animal dies or a person dies, you dig in the ground and you put the body in. But it also means to be engraved or inscribed, an epigraph or printer's ink. Well, that's Yahweh writing, engraving with his finger on the tables of stone. That's what this is talking about, what he wrote about. Het vabrish, white, pale, whole, aperture, nobleman, made clear or evident. The aperture, like of a camera lens. And it's like, but like hoary, white, something ennobled, you go, wait a second, this is making clear and evident the meaning of what he said out of his own mouth that he wrote with his own finger, which is Hebrew words and letters. Pei-yod, something is in, something that opens. Well, it means mouth, but it's a picture of a grave. Yeshua coming out of the grave. Israel coming out of the dispersion. A rat living in a hole. A bat living in a cave. It's something living that comes out. Well, Het-yod is also the word for life. And Resh Tav is the exalted man of the covenant. So I could turn this around and was saying that the alphabet letters is at the heart of the DNA of the Messiah, the Mashiach, because he is the quintessential Resh man, and that he's called all of us to be like him and walk in his ways. It says one other thing regarding this particular place. It says, Baal Zephon va-yechana lafnei Migdal. They encamped before Migdal. Baal Zephon. That means Bet Ayin Lamed. Ayin Lamed is a yoke. It also means above or to be raised up, or it's like the pestle and the mortar and the pestle. It's something that has to do with or an association with. And Zephon, well, that's the word, Zephon is the word north, like Zephaniah, but it also means hidden. So because this phrase is, this is what I was exclaiming Terry, about this extra phrase on some of the campsites. A lot of the campsites are just the name of the campsite, then the next to the name of the campsite, then the next one. But a few of them has another phrase, like at the edge of the wilderness, but here it's Baal Zephon. Well, that means this is regarding the place where it's been hidden. Zephon, what's been hidden? The meanings of the words in the Sefer that Daniel was told to hide and seal. The place where Yahuwah's face, the meanings of the words that came out of his mouth. Why doesn't he answer our prayers? Why has Israel been disparaged and stomped on? And why does it look like the four beasts of Daniel 7 are going to tear his people apart? Because we didn't regard his words. Where do you find that? That's in his words. So here it is. In the alphabet letters, where life is exhibited is where I have hid myself. That's another way to read the words of this campsite. Where Yahweh is saying, well, there's another way to read this word Migdal is graceful with ribbons twirling. They encamped, they parked right there. Well, that's why we're going on and on about this particular study. It's because this is where Yahuwah, our Elohim, is to be found graceful with ribbons twirling. His heart is enthused. You start studying his words, your heart becomes enthused. Your mind expands. I've had numerous people from around the world say that when they started looking at this Hebrew, this Paleo-Hebrew, this Mishkan pattern, seeing Mashiach Yeshua in it, understanding that every single letter was placed there as a prophetic map for us to take hold of, believe in, take heart in, that within them their spirit comes alive. Just like the resurrection of Yeshua out of the grave. It's a fractal pattern. This is the reality. This is the gold mine. This is the greatest treasure in the universe. And these words say so. Look at the whole schema engineered by design by the Creator, ordered, layered. One part is absolute. That's the message in the alphabet. It doesn't say it's the message in the alphabet, but these words can be determined to say one part is absolute, and I'm saying the only thing that's absolute. Our historians lied to us, our scientists lied to us, our doctors have lied to us, our politicians have lied to us, and our preachers have lied to us, our educators have lied to us. But the alphabet of Yahweh's own mouth cannot lie to us. It can be taken to mean a number of different things. But everything it truly means when keyed to the 7 days of creation, the Tabanit Mishkan, the Moedim of Leviticus 23, the Beatitudes of Yeshua in Matthew 5, everything is locked in to be absolute, pure truth. Completely trustworthy. It's useful for protection because the threat is very real. It goes on to say, Numbers 33:8. They passed through the midst of the sea toward the wilderness, went on a 3-day trip in the wilderness of Etham, and camped in Marah. Another way to read that is, so they passed through a prescribed zone of deception, a reasonable quandary, seemingly contrary. Wait a minute, Yahweh says, I'm your provider, and he takes them out of Egypt, and the first thing he does is he makes them hungry and thirsty. No provision? Of course they're going to be perplexed. What the heck is going on here? We ate fish and had leeks and onions and garlic in Egypt, even though we were slaves, but we still had something to eat. Wasn't that better than starving? He was trying to purge their gastrointestinal systems of the parasites, gave them the bitter waters of Meribah that was supposed to cleanse them. There's more to the story, but the point is, what I'm saying is that there's a way to read this. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. I wrote it up, called Campsites, Numbers 33. And I sent this to a few people. I'm going to put it on the website. I'll make it available if people want to see it. But what you're saying, I didn't wrap it up in a synopsis and it wasn't so clear.
Well, the point I was making is 24 over 20 years ago when Chuck Missler did his study on Genesis 5, the genealogy, and the message encoded in the 10 names of that genealogy. It's pretty cut and dried. It's real simplistic. And I was trying to explain to you that that's probably what people are going to expect from this.
But they didn't get it from my study. You couldn't even see something that simple or that clear in the study that I put together. Because
Well,
it was left too cryptic, or it was left too sparse.
Well, it's
or
just
it
I
wasn't
was kind
tied
of
together.
spoiled on the Missler thing. It was just simplistic, laid
I
out.
tried to
and
keep
it's
it to a minimum. I
Yeah.
should maximize it. Fill it out a little bit more.
Well, the way he did it, he completed it and then put everything together and it had a clear message in it. That was, 20 years ago. And that's what I was kind of expecting out of this, but obviously you're bringing it out better than I could read from the study.
Let me say the next phrase of the next few. You got Mara Elima, then Ve Chano al Yom Suf. They encamped adjoining the Sea of Reeds, and then Bamidbar Sin, the wilderness of Sin, and then Dalit Pei Kuf Hey, Dafacha. I knew a guy by the name of Depke. That's exactly the same consonants as Depke. Dalit D-P-Q-H, hey. And then toward Alosh. We don't know what any of those are, but here, I'll just cut to the chase. So the words were bound up. Remember, they just came out of this bitterness. Yahuwah spoke plainly. He just did 10 plagues. He just had them cross the Sea of Reeds. And now they were brought to these bitter waters where had they drinking the bitter waters, that would have, the herbs, the minerals would have completely purged them of their parasites and whatever was going on physiologically. But they just complained and bitterly moaned. So the words were bound up, made mute. Remember, everything that Yahweh says to us, he appears as a reflection of our own attitude. So if we get bitter about him, then he seems like this bitter, nasty guy. We could elaborate, but the point is, it goes on to say, as if a strong terrorist made a widow of Israel. Like, he said he's going to be Elohim, and then he drags us out here. Where is he? He's gone. Like, oh, you're my betrothed maiden of Israel, and then he drags her out here to the wilderness and then abandons her. Why shouldn't Israel say, where is Yahweh? Where is he who said he'd be our protector and defender and provider?
Well, we have no evidence that they prayed whatsoever and asked for these things. They just whined and sniveled.
There's a lot more to the story. These same words go on to say, paradoxically, the enrichment was encased thematically in the obvious. There's a word here that means to encase as a theme. Well, that's the shape of a letter. A letter is actually like putting a sword in a scabbard, or a knife in a sheath, or a gun in a holster. It's the shape of something which is a case that's kind of like the shape that keeps it safe, that retains the vibrancy, the volatile power of what's in each letter is wrapped up in the orthography. So somewhere right around this period of time of coming out of Egypt, Moshe was supposed to sit down and write all the words of Yahuwah. Right around this same period of time, historically. And yet there's no evidence before Moshe that anybody ever wrote anything. Whether Abraham did, or Joseph did, or whether they came through from Enoch on the ark with Noah, that's all speculation. And there's stories in the book of Jasher or Yovelim that they did, but there's no evidence, nothing's ever been found. But certainly at this time, right at this time, where Moshe was told to write down these words in these campsites, suddenly he's using the Hebrew alphabet. And there's something about these very words of Elima, and then El Yom Suf, and Bamidbar Sign. See, the Bamidbar Sign, well, that's not sin, meaning doing something wrong. That's an English word. But Samak Yod Nun is sin, which is the word for China, but it also means to study as an erudite scholar. And the word Bamidbar, that means in the wilderness, but Midbar is a place of words or stipulations. So you could say that the wilderness of sin means Yahweh telling his people, I am providing you, or that he wants us or demands us, at least he's providing for us to study as an erudite scholar, really diligently. Is it a command? You have to, you better, you must? Or is it, here's your option, but you're encouraged to? You're encouraged to study this language as a very intently, eruditely, as a scholar, as if you were seeking for the universe's greatest treasure. And that whatever you find is for your good, for your use. Not just, hey, it's a shiny thing, I can sit on the shelf. A chunk of gold, if you spend it, it's no longer yours. You can buy something with it, but a chunk of gold is only useful for what? To sit on the shelf or to buy something else. But every word in Yahweh's language is useful for peace of mind, peace of heart unto eternity, because it's His face, it's His countenance, it's His heart we're studying. It's a place of wisdom. So to study the language as if it were pictures, like the Chinese language is a collection of lines which are pictographic, provided one looks carefully and thinks over, which is to say meditate, deliberate, weigh carefully, as a sailor navigating the sea, the perfect truth, charting one's course, elevated above and beyond the bitterness, the sea of bile. So somehow there's this sea of bitterness because of the circumstances that are very real. And for us to look into this language and say, there's a provision here. If I take to my heart, in my mind, with all my diligence, to seek Yahweh's face in navigating these letters by these words, and I can chart my course through and somehow float up above the bile, the bitterness of this circumstance. And I've found, and I've had other people testify, that even in the midst of this COVID quarantine, when you start putting your mind, your heart on these words and trying to figure out what they mean, even if you don't read Hebrew, learn the alphabet. Look at the numbers. The Aleph is 1, Bet is 2. Look at the pictographs. Just start reading. Just start studying. Your heart will be redeemed, will be transformed. These words, these letters are alive. The point is, I'm not going to go through any more right now. We're at the end of this particular video. I'm just trying to establish this as an introduction. And here's a little poem here. Melody is the wing of a poem. Music carries words as a breeze, on which imagination floats. Yearnings take to soaring when lyrics ride a stream of light. Lyric Wing. That's the name of a person that we happen to meet up in Oregon City. Lyric Wing. What a great name. So we wrote this poem about that because it's fitting to exactly this. There's something about music. There's something about hearing a certain tune. Music comes to heart, and you take these words in your imagination. So you can sit and listen to the scary stories. You can listen to the fact that, oh, this virus is going to kill millions of people, and they're going to bring the tribulation, and they're going to shut down business, and they're going to do blah, 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 all this stuff, and the giants are going to take over, and the Nephilim and the space aliens. It's like, no, wait a minute. Yahweh said He'd restore His people. Yahweh said this is the age of Mashiach. Yahweh said He'd bring all His people back to the land and cause the land to resprout and bring the latter rains. And Yahweh said, what? Learn the alphabet. Study His words. We'll make another video, but this is just to encourage us to, what did Yahweh say? Remember.
Hallelujah.